All right. Hello, my name is Autumn Brown, and I'm here today, August 31st, 2022, with Miss Anita Arnold. And we are going to talk about her background, her childhood growing up, and how her childhood and her love of art eventually translated into her work with Black Ink here in Oklahoma City. So thank you, Miss Arnold, for being here and speaking with us today. Let's just start out with where were you born? What city were you born, and what was it like growing up for you?
Actually, I was born at Route 1, Box 31, Tecumseh, Oklahoma. That's where I was born, in a little house that my grandfather and grandmother owned on about, I guess at the time I was born, it was about 120 acres of land. And I'm a country girl. I grew up, my grandfather had aspirations, and he could see that he would be a wealthy man one day. Well, it didn't work out that way. So, to make that long story short, my earliest memories, of being a child there, I can remember my mother, she was living in Oklahoma City at the time, because it was not uncommon for people to have children that lived, on the farm but worked in the city, because the city paid more money. And so my mother had moved not to Shawnee, which was the next largest town or city. Some people moved to Shawnee. She came to Oklahoma City. So she came to see us a lot, bring us pretty clothes. We were the best dressed. My sister Carol and I, we were the best dressed students down there in that part of the woods, because our mother always brought these pretty clothes, because she worked at a department store in Oklahoma City. And my earliest memory as a child, I think I must have been about 3 or 4 years old, and she had a Kodak camera, one of those old-fashioned ones, and there was this big rock that sat on this hill. The hill was part of the property that my grandfather owned, because the house I was born in stood on top of a hill. And I can remember hearing her say, "Now point your finger." And so I have that photo of me pointing my finger, under my mother's guidance. And so that's the earliest memory I have. I knew that farm life was hard, because that was before they had these big John Deere tractors and all that. My grandfather actually had 2 mules and some horses. He had a bunch of cows. They were mostly milk cows. We were what you might call self-sufficient. We didn't need to go into town for anything except flour and sugar, sometimes, or cornmeal. But he had one of those grinders. You could grind up corn and make your own meal. So he did that for a while until he decided that wasn't worth the effort. Mm-hmm. But he grew everything that you could think of on that farm, from vegetables to fruits to anything that you thought you needed. And then we had a storm shelter. They called them cellars back then. And it was kind of underground. And my grandmother canned fruits and vegetables, and she put them there. That's how they preserved them. If they didn't preserve them in the cellar, then, if it was pork, you salted it down, and you had these, he had a little house where, he hung his hams that he had salted down and that sort of thing. So I was really living pretty good, but I thought not, because see, I had visions of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and bologna sandwiches like the town kids had. Mm-hmm. And we met up and went to school with the town kids that lived in Earlsboro, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Well, they were in town, so there's a grocery store. They just run around there and buy some light bread, as we called it. Later on, white bread was the name. And they brought these bologna sandwiches to school. And I had a full meal before I left because we always had rice and bacon, a ham, a red-eye gravy, that sort of thing. And it was filling. But I just wanted one of those bologna and cheese sandwiches. And also, I learned how to work hard there. I was pretty competitive. I loved school because, when you live on the farm and your nearest neighbor is maybe a mile away, then you have plenty of time to read. So I knew about Madam Curry and people like that. And I learned to read when I was about 4 years old. So I just went straight into the first grade when I started school, which ended up when I came to Oklahoma City. I was one of the younger ones to graduate from Fredrick Douglass High School.
Oh, wow.
Here. And so I took piano lessons. I thought I was going to become a composer, because Stevie Wonder and those folk, were coming along and they were just making these songs. And I thought, I can do that, so that's kind of where I started with my interest in art. And of course, we had some art classes in elementary school down there, and I never want those to end, but I did well. And then when I would overhear the grown people say something like bragging on their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Francis washed the clothes, blah, blah, blah. And see, down in the country when I was growing up, you had those tin tubs that you wash clothes in, and then you rest them in another tub, and put some bluing in it, and you hung them outdoors. Well, she wasn't going to outdo me. She was in my class. But then I soon learned that when I did do these things competitively, because she could do it, I could do it too, then that was my job. Mm-hmm. And so that's when the recognition of hard work came to bear on the situation. And I actually, when I was actually like chopping cotton, that was my grandfather's favorite crop, was cotton. He raised everything else, but he had lots of cotton. Mm-hmm. I started developing these calluses across my hand, and I would just cry because I thought I was going to be stuck with calluses the rest of my life. That's how you think when you're, 8 or 9 years old, 10 years old. And so then I started praying for the boll weevils to eat up all this cotton. And he thought I was very weird in that way because he knew I was praying about the boll weevils come down and descend them on his crops. So I guess those were early signs of the city life is what I really prefer, mm-hmm. rather than this, even though I didn't get to the city. I did go to the city in the summertime, and stay periods of time. And I met other kids here mm-hmm. in Oklahoma City. And we used to go down to Washington Park, which is still there. And I was up here once when school first started, and they used to wrap the maypole down in Douglas. And I had never seen anybody wrap the maypole.
What's that?
Well, anyway, I write about that a little bit in one of my books, the education book. But you get out there and you wrap the maypole, and I forgot the genesis of that, but I think it came from Europe or something, mm-hmm. because that was the time of Mrs. Bro and her going into, she was supervisor of all the colored schools, in the arts and music, and that sort of thing. And so that was a real creative time, for children here in Oklahoma City. And I just loved wrapping that maypole.
Yeah.
and being with those other kids and, skating down the sidewalk and jumping over the bumps. And I had a bicycle, which is where I learned how to ride. My mother gave me a bicycle. We had gravel roads, so I skinned my knees up a lot, learning to ride a bicycle. But, I had it down by the time I got here so I could fit in real good.
Yeah.
And when I got here, my mother was, continuing my piano lessons because I took piano lessons in the country. And I really thought I was going to be a musician and compose music and all that. Well, the bright lights got me. That's what I tell everybody. The bright lights just carried me on the way to another world. And so the music teacher here in Oklahoma City told me to tell my mother to quit wasting her money because I was not interested in piano. So
wow.
That was the end of the piano lessons. And later on, I kind of wished that I had stuck with it, but I was helpless. I was in the big city, and I moved here when I was 13 years old after my grandmother died. That's when we moved. My sister and I moved here to Oklahoma City. And we were just in the bright lights all the time, we used to take rides out to the airport just to see the planes take off.
Oh,
that was
wow.
just thrilling. And at Christmas time, we'd ride over, in the richer parts of the city to see the Christmas lights. This was just thrilling. And so, and when I started junior high school at what is now called the Douglass next door, the bands, all of the bands and the orchestras and the music and all of that. I was fascinated.
Yeah.
You talking about deeply engaged and involved. It was a thrill just for me to go down to Washington Park and watch the band practice.
Wow.
Just practice. I thought that was just incredible, just out of this world. And then the majorettes and how they threw those batons up in the air and down between their legs. All of this was happening, and I think that was happening long before we knew anything about Florida A&M and Grambling and those. I think it was invented up here in Oklahoma City, to tell the truth. But
wow.
At any rate, and it was synchronized, of course, with the football games, and I didn't run down there to the football stadium to watch the games. I went a time or two, but I wasn't that interested, even though I played softball when I was growing up in the country. That was one of the games we played. We played Andy over, where you throw the ball over on the other side of the house and go like that, and hopscotch and all that.
Yeah.
So I already know all of those things, and that's what I grew up with. But this was just thrilling, and to go down to Washington Park in the summertime and swim. We get up and eat those bowls of cereal and go right straight to the park, and we'd swim until the lifeguard said, "Oh, well, it's like break time, lunch." And, you can come back at 2 or whatever the time was, and we run home and have bologna sandwiches and
like you'd always dreamed of.
Potato chips and Coca-Colas. And then we'd go back down to the park and we'd swim some more.
Wow.
That was just heaven.
It sounds like such a dream for a young child to, that's when you think of summer and being a child, that's what you think of,
that's
eating breakfast and then getting out the house and exploring the day, coming back, eating lunch, then doing it again, staying out till the street lights come
that's
on. Right.
That's correct. That's what we did. We all had to be at home before it got dark, for sure. But our parents were at work, and they trusted us that we wouldn't get into anything. We weren't. We were just having fun.
Yeah.
And there were times when we really had fun. But we learned to be entrepreneurs. I learned on the farm how to be an entrepreneur, watching my grandfather, if he had a crop of good watermelons, for example, he would spread out the newspapers and he would take all of those seeds and put them on the newspaper and let them dry out. That was his crop for the next year.
Oh, wow.
And so I had seen all of these entrepreneurial, efforts by my grandfather, because I told you, he thought that he was going to grow up to be very wealthy. Mm-hmm. But he was also not only a businessman / farmer, but he was a very spiritual guy. He built the church we joined, he and his oldest son. And so I started out on that path as an AME. Well, when I came to Oklahoma City, I joined the AME church up here. And so, we went to church on Sunday. And I used to sing in the choir, but certain things would just tickle me and I couldn't contain myself. So I'd be laughing in church and folk were thinking we were being rude, but it might have been somebody crunched on the bread.
Yeah.
And I started laughing and I couldn't help it. So anyway, those are, some very pleasant memories that I had growing up here. And then at Douglass, I was competitive, so I was an honor student. I had always been an honor student, all the way, even as a young adult going to college, I was always an honor student. And I passed that on to my children, when they got ready to go to school, to college. I told them in no uncertain terms, I said, I will pay for your education. You will not have student loans and that sort of thing to weigh you down. I said, but look, I don't pay for D's and F's. That's out. And I frown on C's. I frown real hard on C's. And so they lived up to their, end of the bargain, and I did too. Mm-hmm. So when they graduated from college, they did not have what students are struggling with these days.
Right.
And anyway, I was, in addition to being an honor student, I was really a nerd by the time I got up here, even though I was internalizing all of these things that I saw and was just excited. Mm-hmm. And the Girl Scouts and going down to Lake Murray, for the Girl Scout camp. And I used to supposed to sell Girl Scout cookies, but I found it hard not to eat them all up. And then had to figure out, well, since I ate just about all the cookies up, I'll have to give up my lunch money to pay for the cookies that I ate that I didn't sell.
Yeah.
So Douglass High School, middle school, as it was, and it was middle school and high school, okay, because it was during a period when Oklahoma City was very segregated. In fact, segregation was everywhere. And even the school I went to, down in Earlsboro, I had to walk 2 miles to the school. And but they counted the land and building as part of Earlsboro and not Tecumseh. So I walked 2 miles a day, going to school and back. And
so did you went to school in Earlsboro or Tecumseh?
No, not in Tecumseh. They had in the town of Tecumseh, if there were any African American families in the town of Tecumseh, they still went to a separate school.
Okay.
But it wasn't the one I went to. I'm not sure how they drew the lines, but we went to school at Earlsboro. Okay. It wasn't in the town proper. It was out from Earlsboro before you get to the town.
Okay.
And so I had lots of relatives down there. And so when they say it takes a village, I felt like the village was there because you knew all of them, you knew all your neighbors, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And even though the nearest neighbor on the farm was at least a half a mile away, but we'd see them at school. And so, there that was. But this kind of, the highlights of some of what I experienced living in the country and then coming to Oklahoma City.
So, talk me through your experience at Douglass, especially going from attending school in Earlsboro, kind of more country, to coming to the city. And Douglass is such a historical school even today. So, what was it like for you to transition to city life and to going to Douglass?
It was an easy transition for me because, as I said, when your nearest neighbor, you have lots of time to study, and watch the stars at night and know where all of the stars, the Big Dipper and all that. I knew all of that. And I had found out when I was in the 4th grade, I believe it was. I still have the book. It was a math book, and it had a section in it. I think it was called Think Before You Answer. That's where I learned to work word problems. And I was so happy to learn that I could think and think my way through. And math was easy to me. It just became my favorite subject. And then when I moved to Oklahoma City, I was so good when I went into algebra, because I had my fair share of excitement about working those word problems. The teacher, actually, he wasn't supposed to be doing this, but I made 100 every time, 100 every time. So he told me one day he wanted me to come by his room after school. The school was closed for the classes. And I went by and he said, "This is what I want you to do." He said, "I need you to help me out." And I thought, okay, what? So he said he wanted me to take, whenever we had tests, and we had tests all the time, he said, you look over yours, for I know it's all right. He said, "But I want you to grade these papers for you. You just go down and you mark the ones that are wrong and the ones that are right. And then bring them back to me before school, before the classes, before you go to your first class." I graded his papers for a semester or two, really. And
wow.
Everybody in the classroom knew that if I took the test, it was going to be 100. I seldom missed one. And so so I was ready, when I came. And so then I found out that there's such a thing as politics at a young age, because we were having these competitions around with other schools, in the city. And so my teacher, whose name I will not call, he's on the record, if somebody wanted to check it out, and he's deceased now anyway. But he wanted to send me to the competition because he knew I'd bring a trophy back. And I was out anxious. I was ready to go, because I just ate math up, really.
Yeah.
And I came in one day, and he told me he wanted to talk to me, during my recess period or whatever it was. And he told me that I wouldn't be going to the competition because somebody's daddy who had influence at the school wanted his daughter to go.
Wow.
And so I got bumped. But she was not nearly what I was. And interestingly enough, and she never knew this because I just sadly went on down the street disappointed, about that. But she was my roommate in college.
Wow.
And she always complained about how she really wasn't that good, in math and all that. And so I said, it's water under the bridge.
Yeah.
So I was disappointed, but I just went on and continued being excited about other things.
Yeah.
But that was probably one of the lowest points.
Yeah.
as I was going through school.
Wow.
And when I graduated, I was next to the youngest one. I was going to be the youngest one graduating in my class. And then another person came from another school. I'm not sure where their Genesis beginnings were. But her name was Anita, too.
Oh, wow.
And she was a year younger than I. And so she was the youngest one to graduate. I thought, oh, shoot, I thought I had that made,
Right.
But nevertheless, I excelled and was an honor student, all the way through Douglass. And the only time I made a choice between, the classroom and some activity, they discovered I could play softball, girls softball, real good, because I grew up in the country playing softball. And so they would come to the window. I was in the Spanish class. They said, get out of class, come on, practice with us. We're going to have this game, and they would just, and so a time or two I asked the teacher if I could go, because I was an A student in there too, and he was very good. His name was Mr. Graham, and he married a lady who was had a Spanish background. I'm not sure which country she came from, but we had to learn it where you could speak it, and so I did, in fact, get excused from class to go play softball.
Oh, wow.
And so a lot of people said, well, you played basketball, didn't you? I know, because I said, no, I didn't. I did not play basketball in school. I played softball. I played volleyball. And then as an adult, I learned how to play tennis. But, I learned how to swim, sort of. When I say sort of, I mean I swam, but I was really good at the side stroke. It seemed like, I get confused if you were swimming with your head under the water, and, like that. I wasn't any good at that, but I could do that side stroke, So I did that. And I got by, and I loved diving off the diving board into the deep end, and, like that. So, and I grew up to have a swimming pool, believe it or not, in one of my homes. And that was a lot of fun until, I realized I had to work real hard to pay for that swimming pool and its maintenance and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's not exactly a rag to riches story. It's not, but it's certainly from the country to the city and more.
Yeah.
Because, later on, as I went into, career fields. See, I got married young. I was 19, when I got married. And so I had a scholarship to Howard, but I came back here because my mother was disappointed. She wanted me to stay there and be part of Jack and Jill, which is the same Jack and Jill as here today.
Okay.
It was alive and well back then. And so she could see me at the Jack and Jill ball or whatever it was. And Dr. Carley Barkley, who was our family doctor, and he had an office down there on 2nd Street, Deep Deuce. We called it 2nd Street. Adults called it Deep Deuce. I didn't never know all that when I was growing up.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that either.
Well, they did. That was the nickname folk gave 2nd Street, the 300 block.
Yeah.
When they were down there doing business and entertaining and all of that sort of stuff. My knowledge of 2nd Street was very limited because the Aldrich Theater that was down there, African Americans and blacks went to 3 theaters, the Aldrich, the East Side Theater, and the Jewel Theater. And when we went to the Aldrich Theater, our parents took us, and they dropped us off right there in front of the Aldrich, and they said, now when this movie is over, you stand right here, don't you move. That was because they knew about Second Street and the good times and the bands and
Yeah.
jazz and all that. That was considered street music. That wasn't like
Oh,
refined music.
I see.
It was street music, and so that's what they played down there on Second Street, jazz and blues. And I never knew, even though I worked at Randolph Drugstore, which was right there on the corner of Second and Styles, which is now Russell Perry.
Okay.
Well, I worked in the drugstore there after I graduated from high school, but was getting ready to go off to college. And so people used to come in there. I worked behind the soda fountain. And so pretty soon, Dr. Randolph and Dr. Tolliver, they both worked in the pharmacy back there, and it was Randolph Drugstore. It seemed like I had too much time on my hand, talking to the customers after I made the sundae or the soda. Then they said, okay, we're going to teach you how to run the cash register over there. So then I did both,
Okay.
like that. But I had little jobs when I was in high school at Douglass, babysitting mostly, and made a little money that way. But as young kids, we had that entrepreneurial spirit. We did stuff like picking up the soda pop bottles that were on the street, and we bought plenty of soda pop from Sonny's grocery store, which sat right across from the fairgrounds, which is where the Douglass is now. They used to be the fairgrounds.
Oh.
And so we would sell the soda pop bottles, and he'd give us the money. And we always had money.
Yeah.
When we were little kids, we had money. And then we found out that the coupons that you get, 10 cents off on 5 pounds of flour and stuff like that, our parents were getting these coupons, and they put them in the drawer. And we decided, the little pack rats, decided that we would just take our parents' coupons and we'd go over there and redeem them without buying anything. And Sonny would give us the nickel or dime or whatever it was that these coupons, were supposed to be off on the products. And I think he got in trouble later, because the companies were discounting the product, but the product hadn't gone anywhere. It was still on the shelf.
Yeah.
But Sonny was, he knew we were going to spend every nickel of it in his store.
Right.
On bologna and cheese and Coca-Colas and strawberry and orange pop. He knew that. And then we went in one time and he told us he was sorry he couldn't, cash the coupons anymore. But we always had money.
Yeah.
We were real little hustlers. And so one of our hustles was when the fair left town. We would sit out there because I told you the, racial line was there. So we could go on. They had a day when school kids could go. They had it free to the fair. And they had a day when country kids could come up and go. Well, we went both days free. And they had a stand where, folk would throw $50, to see if they could win a teddy bear for whoever they had with them. Mm-hmm. And they had, it was the cement was covered with sawdust. And we would scope it out, and see. And so when the fair left, the railroad tracks are still down there. They would load up everything on the rail cars, and we would just, like little buzzards, we were just waiting. And as soon as we thought the train was on down the track,
okay.
So there we were, the bunch of us, and there were about 7 or 8 of us in the bunch. As soon as the train hit, we could see the last car going down the track. We would go over there on that fairground and we start sweeping the sawdust off with our hand. And it was I got 50 cents, I got 50 cents.
Oh,
Because
wow.
they would just leave it the way it was. And we'd go over there
And just collect coins?
oh yes, we had lots of money when the fair left. We did. And shoot, son, it was right there at the store waiting on us. And we would pack baskets. We would pack baskets of potato chips and bologna and cheese sandwiches, and we'd buy not just Kool-Aid, we'd buy Coca-Colas and whatever we thought we wanted, and we'd go to the stadium, the football stadium that we used when we went to school down there. It was the same one that they would use with the fair, with some of those shows and stuff. We'd go up there in the stadium and sit down and spread our lunch, and if you think we didn't have a feast that day, we had great fun. We did.
Just splurged.
Oh yes, absolutely. So anyway, there that was. So it was what I call a happy. I mean, I told you the bright lights got me.
Yeah.
I thought I hadn't gone to heaven.
Well, you mentioned like your early days with piano and how that was an early introduction into art, but like when were you introduced to art in a way where you were like, this is what I want my career, my legacy to be, is in the arts?
I didn't make that decision. You know, a lot of things happen to me in my life, and it just kind of unfolds. And I usually start the sentence with, I was minding my own business when. Most of my achievements or whatever I end up doing starts with that sentence. I was minding my own business when. And sometimes the phone rang or this or that. But no, I told you about my love for math.
Mm-hmm.
I had a career in corporate America. This right here, this is the furthest thing from my mind.
Wow.
I never. Now, I enjoyed the arts because I told you I enjoyed it when I was in school, but it wasn't anything that, I said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to write these songs. Because what happened, I wrote this one song, and the lyrics went, I got to go to school, I got to go to school. If I don't go to school, I'll be a big fat fool. And so I thought, and I had the ham bone, I had all that worked out. And then the kids laughed at me at school.
Oh,
and
wow.
They denied that they were laughing. They said they were laughing when I wasn't laughing. I was serious. And so that ended that because I didn't like to be embarrassed like that. And so I put my, artsy desires aside, and then when I learned that I loved math so and I could think, that just meant the world to me. Yeah. And so these competitions around, I told you I was taking Spanish, I was taking a Spanish class. And so we had a competition out at OCU, even though we were segregated, the schools met out there and whoever. I went out there and I was competing, not in Spanish, but I also took, we had to take arts in school. So they didn't just go away. I mean, what I envisioned first never happened. But you had to take music, some kind of music. Either you had to be in the choir. If you didn't sing good, you had to take music appreciation. And then, you had to learn who those great composers were and all that. Classical music was what was taught in the schools. Jazz and blues, that was street music. Mm-hmm. It wasn't allowed in the schools. But Mrs. Bro, who was supervisor of, fine arts for all of the colored schools, well, she provided the venue because she had the Aldrich Theater, which was a movie theater, but it also doubled as a venue. And a lot of musicians who came to town played that. But I didn't even know any of that stuff because our parents kept us away from it. They were consistent with classical music and fine arts and all that. We went to a lot of movies. We went to see cowboy movies. In fact, my middle name was taken from one of the cowboys, Lash LaRue. I don't know why my mother was thrilled with Lash LaRue, but my born name was Anita LaRue Golden.
Oh, wow.
Yes. But the system says your maiden name, so LaRue gets put aside.
Oh, yeah.
But I was born Anita LaRue Golden.
Wow. Okay.
So at any rate, as I was progressing through the company, and I started with Western Electric Company, which was what was considered my real job, because I had always had little jobs, car hop, at Blanchard's Drive-In, which was, an iconic place for years, because that's where everybody went after the football game.
Okay.
So, I was a car hop too. And so, like I said, I've always made money, and I always had this insecurity about me that I needed to know where my next dime was coming from. I just wasn't going to jump out there in the big wide world and say, what? No check coming in.
Right.
I
get that.
That was stressful to me.
Get that.
But at any rate, when I went to Western Electric, I didn't go out there to get a job. I was just riding with a friend. At least we started out friends. She called me up and asked me what I was doing. By then, I was married. I had my oldest child, Chris. And Chris was a little baby. And she was looking for a job. So she asked me to ride out to Western Electric with her. Well, long story short, I got the job and she didn't, and she quit speaking to me. But I didn't. Look, I was just riding.
I was minding my business.
I was. And what happened, Western Electric at that time, you walk into the employment office and anybody walk in the door, they figured they were looking for a job. So they were handing out applications. I took one and I thought, okay, I'll fill it out. They gave it to me. I filled it out.
Well.
Then they called me in for an interview. They called her in for an interview. And they liked what I said. I guess they didn't like what she said. I don't know what they said to her. But then they told me to come back and take the test. So on the way home, we were comparing notes. At least she was. She said, what did they tell you when you went in there? And she was grumbling, having driven out there. And she couldn't even get to. I said, they told me to come back and take the test. Ice, ice, ice. And so she could hardly speak to me the rest of the way home.
Oh, wow.
Because they didn't tell her to come back and take the test. So I get home and I discuss it with my husband, and he said, well, you put your foot out there, so you just have to follow through. And I thought, if you say so. But see, his family, they, were out of Kansas City, Missouri, for the most part. Mm-hmm. And I met him when he was out at Tinker Air Force Base as a airman, and I was car hopping at Blanchard's. That's how that happened. Well, at any rate, so I went out there and I took the test, and there was nothing I liked better than to take a test. Boy, I just whipped that test right on out, and then they told me to come back and take another test that was, looking at your dexterity, how you work with your hands. Well, I never was that good, I thought, like competitively working with my hand. But I mean, they were impressed. And then they told me they were going to hire me, and the ice really formed, between me and the friend who went out there. So they hired me with an apology. And the apology was, I'm sorry, but you're more qualified than what I'm going to offer you. And they wanted me to take a job out in the shop. And, I thought, well, okay. But it was the assembly line processes, which I found that I just really didn't like that. I just really didn't like that job. But, I put my foot out there. But the apology said, we're sorry, we know you're qualified for a lot more, but we haven't opened those doors yet.
So segregation. So basically Black people were only allowed to work on the assembly line?
Not in the office.
Wow.
They didn't have any Black supervisors. Those doors hadn't opened yet. And that's what the Urban League was working on. And they were the ones that really convinced me to stay out there, because the first day I went, I was looking to see how many black people that they had out there. So there were, counting me, I think there were 6 in the whole facility. They were not down here on Reno where the buildings would turn into an outlet mall.
Yeah.
But they were out here on Northwest 39th Street, pretty close to Bethany.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And that's where I started out. But I got sick the first day on the job. I mean, I had this migraine. I did not know what was going on with me. And I was not even there 2 hours. I couldn't hold my head up, And so the supervisor came by and asked me what was wrong. And I said, my head hurts. So they sent me to medical. So medical said, go see your doctor, and you come back and bring this slip of paper where she signed off that you're okay to come back to work. So I went to see Dr. Charles Atkins.
Okay.
Right across, his office was right across from OIC. I mean those Atkins Gardens right there on Martin Luther King. So I went over there and I told him I had this migraine headache, whatever it was. And so he said, oh, okay, well, we're going to have to give you a shot, you got the flu or whatever he said it was, something like that. So I said, okay. I said, how long do you think it's going to take me to recover from this, So he said, well, and I said, well, where I work, they told me to have you sign off on this piece of paper. Well, I didn't know the Urban League was working, trying to get doors open out there at Western Electric. And as soon as he said, where do you work? I said, Western Electric. He got right on the phone and he called the Urban League. And Nathaniel Johnson, I think that was his last name, was the executive director of the Urban League, which was down here in the Finley building that they tore down as a hotel now.
Okay.
Anyway, he called him and said, I got this young lady here, you need to talk to her. And so he said, oh, well, what's going on? They hired her out there. Wasn't like, well, they didn't know that I had just rode out there with this, and it happened. They had been working diligently trying to get black folk out of Western Electric. And so then it was like Nathaniel Johnson told Dr. Atkins he had to get me way off, because this was important.
Yeah.
So I had to go and get a shot every day.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, a penicillin shot. And so finally he told me, I was good, okay to go to work. And so I went on back to work, and I thought, see, first day I knew I shouldn't have been out here anyway, like that. And then we had 20-minute lunch breaks. That means 20 minutes to run to the cafeteria, go through a line and swallow. I didn't get to eat the first week because I wasn't accustomed to that pace, in 20 minutes. Well, I was just about through with that job. So Nathaniel Johnson, when he talked to me, he said, I don't care what happens, you must stay out there.
Oh, Lord.
And he said, you call me. If you got the urge to quit, call me. You can't do it. It's bigger than you, Anita. It's bigger than you, he kept telling me. How many times did I call him?
Right.
Many. So that's how I started in there. And so then after I got in there and I found out that the company would pay your tuition if you went back to college or if you started college. But you had to make, a certain grade point average. And I thought, oh, time for me to go back to school, because my mother was so disappointed because I wasn't at the Jacksonville ball and all that kind of stuff. So, so I had told her, I promised her I would go back to school and that I would finish school But there was no point in wasting her money because when I got to Howard University, that's where she packed my bags in some D.C. because the neighbor, the one that was ended up being my roommate at Howard, her uncle was president of Howard University, Mordecai Johnson.
Okay.
So my mother packed my stuff up. She didn't ask me where I wanted to go to college. I had a scholarship up there. She said, that's where you're going. Follow your bag. And the way we went, following the bag. But when I got there, they were asking me, what do you want to major in? And I said, well, I don't know. Let's see, which fields pay money? As I told you, I had a little insecurity about that. So they said, well, what do you like? I said, I like math. Oh, you could be a teacher. No, I'm not being a teacher. That's clear. What else do you like? I like history because I had taken black history, or Negro history as we call it, at Douglass. I said, I like history. You could be a history teacher. I said, I just said no teacher. So then it was like, well, what else do you like? And so I gave them my 3 best likes. See, and none of them. It was either you could be an accountant, if you don't want to be a math teacher, you could be and I could see myself sitting on a stool with one of these green light, and I thought, no, that won't work. So anyway, when I came back, I told her, I'll go back when I've decided what it is I'm supposed to be. Yeah. I don't know. And I said, there's no point in wasting money with me taking courses and, no place to land, so to speak, because I didn't have a made-up mind. And so that money part was important to me. And so as it turned out, my uncle, my mother's brother-in-law, called me up one day, and he knew I had said that when I decide, I'll go back. And so I did. I went to her brother-in-law's house, and because he had called me and said, you need to come over here. My sister's here from California. She has something to say. Well, his sister said, I'm in the computer field. It pays so much money. Well, she was ringing my bell right then and there, talking about it paid all this money. And so I asked her what kind of background you had to have. She said, well, you have to love math. Don't say anymore. My mind is made up, and I was off and away trying to find where they were offering computer classes. And OSU Tech was the first place in Oklahoma that offered any computer classes. And away I headed to get into OSU, and there were some valuable lessons learned in that too. Yeah. Because I called OSU Tech and I told them I wanted to get into the computer classes because they were offering the first ones that fall. And they said, no, wait just a minute. Wait, hold on. They said, are you in the computer field already? I said, no, I'm trying to get in it. They said, no, well, we're reserving the test for those people. And I thought, what? And he said, like card punch operators and, like that. And I thought, that's not right. That's not fair. And so I said, well, okay. So I decided to put some space between the call. And so then I called them up again and I asked, when were they giving the computer test, blah, blah, blah. And so they didn't ask me if I was in the field already. I just asked when they were. So they told me. So I went running out there to take the test. Well, I hadn't gone back to school yet, right? I did miserably on that test because it had been a while. And all of that geometry and algebra that I used to master, it kind of faded in the sun.
Yeah.
So I did it really bad. So anyway, they told us they were going to send the test results. They sent it. I made a D on the test. I thought, D? I'm not going to D on the test, you know. So then I thought, well, okay, let me just see how far I get with this. So then I called back and I asked them when the first day of class was. And so they told me. And I went out there to enroll. And I was enrolling in the first computer classes. And so they said, did you take that programmer's aptitude test? That's what it was.
Oh, okay.
It was an aptitude test. And I said, oh, yeah, I took it. And this is where the rubber meets the road, I thought. So he gets up and he goes through the filing cabinet. See, people think I got a problem with filing and all this stuff. They couldn't find the score, the test, the little card. They said, "You sure? We can't find the record." I said, "Oh yeah, it was such and such a time, such and such a day, blah, 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 blah." And they looked and they said, "Well, we don't see anything. Do you remember what your score was?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I didn't really pay attention. Like that line. That was a line."
Right.
So they said, "Well, okay." So then I was nervous, because I did remember it was a D. And so he said, what are you going to take? I said, Introduction to Computer Programming. He said, what else? I said, that's all. He said, what? You just taking one course? I said, yeah, well, see, I want to make sure I made an A in that course.
Yeah.
And so I took that course. And so then I started increasing the courses. And then when I got tired of all these fooling around, I was making A's in all these classes. Finally, I was just tired of it. And so I just increased the number of hours, going from one extreme to the other. And I was working 40 hours a week and going to school and all that kind of stuff. But I was in a hurry. So I did like summer school, a full load, I made all these. I was determined to succeed. So I was really an honor student on the President's Honor Roll out at OSU. But it was geared toward men because I was the only woman in most of the classes I ever went to.
Oh, wow.
And so I couldn't be part of the honor fraternity. That's what it says, for men only. I said, but I'm a straight A student, Sorry, but it's for men only.
Wow.
So I said, well, okay, I'm still on the President's Honor Roll, whether you let me join your little old
Right.
group or not. I know. And I did have that designation, President's Honor Roll. But I was so tired by the time I finished that school. And my husband was trying to take me out to a nice dinner, 5-course meal and all that. And they came around to take my order. I said, bring all of them at once.
Yeah.
I'm tired. They were just looking. But I was tired. I had to go home and sleep. And so that's how my graduation ended. I did, graduate on the President's Honor Roll and all that kind of stuff. And then my college career, I've gone to many schools. I've always attended classes everywhere I went, even after I left Western Electric, went to South Central Bell in Memphis and AT&T and the U.S. Postal Service. I've always taken classes. Mm-hmm. In fact, if I had taken them for credit, which I could have, I probably would have had 2 PhDs by then, because even when I got to New Jersey and New York, I went to the American Management Association Institute in New York. And I bet you I took almost every course they ever offered.
Wow.
So I said no, because when I didn't finish my master's degree at OU. I started, but I discovered quickly I was in there for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
I was just to get another line on the resume because it seemed easy. It was a master's in industrial engineering. I was computer support at Western Electric Company for industrial engineers, and then later on product engineers. And I found that I hated industrial engineering. And the reason I hated it was because I took a course, which was a very easy course, but I was bored, and it was called ergonomics. I had never counted the minutes in the class. I became a clock watcher. I couldn't help myself. And I said, it just 5 minutes. And so I got up and I went over to the administration office and I said, I'm going to drop this ergonomics course. They said, well, you waited too late. I mean, if you're going to drop something, you have to drop everything. I said, okay, everything.
Right.
And I had never been bored in class. And so I said, okay, well, I just go home and redouble my efforts and all this stuff, and I'll come back and I'll just clench my jaw and go through it. So when I did go back, and I clenched my jaws and I went through ergonomics, because my attitude was bad. It was like, who cares about the definition of glare? I don't. Who cares what the, optimum distance is from the floor to the bottom of the seat? I don't. It was like that. And so when I took that test and finished that semester, I went straight over to the administration office. And they said, yes, can we help you? I said, I withdrew from school. They said, what? Why? I said, I'm in here for the wrong reason. So I've always tried to be clear about why I'm really there.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to be caught in a situation where it was the wrong reason, whether it was an easy line on the resume or whether it was a pot of gold. If it's the wrong reason, I will not take it.
Yeah.
And so, but it didn't mean I would go back to school. I said, if you catch me in a classroom, it'll be because I want to be there.
Yeah.
I want to be there, and it's what I'm seriously interested in.
Wow.
And so by the time I got to AT&T, where I did a lot of very important work, the first thing that happened to me, I was in an engineering sector, so to speak, of the business. But, my background was computers. And so it was a bunch of guys, as usual. And, of course, I was the talk of the town up there in New Jersey. I mean, when I didn't think so when I left from here going there. I thought I was going to Mecca, and I thought everything would be delightful, and I didn't know this funny behavior between blacks. You don't want to be seen at lunch at the same table because you're concerned that somebody might be seeing y'all talk and laugh and get along, and maybe y'all playing or something. They were paranoid.
Oh.
So this one engineer, he was a senior engineer by the name of Bob Belazanza. He was a rich guy. He was a rich guy, but he was working there, and he was a senior engineer. Well, he and some other guys, invited me to join them for breakfast when I came in the cafeteria one morning. So it got to be a habit, I was the only female, and of course the only black person sitting at the table. And so I was talking to one of the guys. No, I wasn't talking to one of the guys. That's not how that happened. I'm getting back to the music and all. I was staying in a motel. The company put me up in a motel, which was down the street from where I worked. and it was a very popular street. It wasn't a street, it was a highway. Route 22. It was kind of like Route 66. Mm-hmm. If it's not on Route 22, it can't be found. So I was staying at a motel. It was a big motel. But that's where they put everybody who came to town, these corporations.
And where were you? In New Jersey?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I was working in Springfield, New Jersey. And I went down to the restaurant. They had a restaurant there. They had an event center there too. I didn't know anything about the event center. I just went to my room and I went down to eat dinner. I ate breakfast at the job, like that. One of the guys that worked at Springfield, I didn't know him. They didn't give me my correct change from dinner. So I was trying to see which way the lady went that waited on me so she could give me my correct change. And so this guy walks over. He was sitting at the bar, but I didn't even know it was a bar and all that stuff. I hadn't explored. And he introduced himself. My name is Greg Morasco. Greg ended up working for me. He said, can I help you? I said, hey, lady, you waited on me. So he said, you work down there in Springfield, don't you? And I said, well, yeah. I said, but I need my change, like that. So he said, she's probably in the kitchen. Well, the kitchen was back around there. And so anyway, she came out and I told her she didn't give me my change. It wasn't no great big old tip, like that. So she gave me my change. And so Greg said, why don't you come over here? Well, I wasn't used to sitting up in a bar, And so he said, well, I'll buy you whatever you want, like whatever you want. So I calmed down a little bit. And so he said, yeah, I know, and he told me where he works at Springfield. Everybody knew me in Springfield. Mm-hmm. I didn't know them. And so he told me, why don't you sit? They have a young man that plays the piano. He's really good, and you'll probably like him, You ought to listen to him. That's what he said. So I decided I wasn't going to do anything but go to the room and read a book or go to sleep, so I might as well. So this guy named Al Boyce, his little short guy, came in and he tickled the ivories. And then he started singing, and he was very talented. And so at his break time, he took a break. Greg took me over and said, this is Miss Anita Arnold, and she's working down here. Well, long story short, Al had a group. It was called Together Forever. And when he found out what I did at Western Electric, I was a manager. Then he asked me if he could talk to me about something real serious, and I said, what? So he said that he wanted to ultimately record music. He was pretty popular around the area, I found out. So he wanted me to hear his group sing. So he invited me down to this very popular place where Whitney Houston used to sing, the Peppermint Lounge in East Orange, New Jersey. And so I went down one evening, to hear his group sing, and they were, quite well, good, real good. So then he asked me if I would become their manager. And that's how all of that started unfolding up there in New Jersey. And so I said, why you want me to be your manager? He said, well, I can't trust it in these people right here, and, based on your background, yada, 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 and you got that position in that company and blah, blah, blah. So that's when I started having these adventures up there with a band and getting them a record deal.
Wow.
And all of that and all of that and all of that. And that's another story.
Do you know what year this was?
Yes, I do. It was about let me see, when did I go to Springfield? It was about 19, 76 maybe,
Okay.
somewhere in there. Or it might be a little bit earlier. I just have to check and see,
Yeah.
because, I've had a long career
Wow.
with a lot of companies. But anyway, I became their manager. And so that's when we went into the studio. We went to the first studio, West Orange, and I was paying for this. And so they were in there practicing on my dime. And I said, I broke into the studio. I said, no, you have to practice at home. You have to be ready when you come in here, blah, blah, blah. So we went through all that and all that. And then finally, we decided to go down to Huff and Gamble studio, which was down in Philadelphia. That's where Teddy Pendergrass and all them recorded. And so that's where we went in and we laid the tracks, and that was pretty fascinating because that was before they had all of the technology they have now. So what you did, I found a guy, or this guy was brought to me. I didn't know most of these folk. It's a network. This guy knows it like that. And so he was very talented. They call him Sugar Bear.
Mm-hmm.
And he could write music just from listening. He could write all the parts. And so that's what he did. He wrote all of the parts out. And then we went into the studio. And it was already arranged. He had arranged. And so the horns came in. Then the violin and the string instruments. And then, Al on the piano and the girls singing with the vocals. They laid all of these tracks like that. And I was sitting there at the big board, where they were done. And it took all day and up to midnight that night. It was on a Saturday and the snow was deep. And that's when we laid down the first tracks.
Wow.
And then the search was on for where you going to get the record deal. Who's going to give you a deal? And so my son, he was down at the University of Oklahoma by then. And so I told him he had always been interested in music and sports. And he had worked at KGOU and he was down at OU as a student. So I told him I wanted, because I sent this guy who was a radio personality in the D.C. area whose brother played for Michael Jackson. And so I sent him to California to get me a deal. He came back and he couldn't even speak and tell me what they said, so I could see where I was, with this. I told Clarence, I said, "Now, this is not acceptable. I mean, what did they tell you?"
Right.
Well, I thought he could speak good because he was on the radio all the time and all that, but he was not talking to me. So I said, okay, that's when we went down to Philadelphia and we laid all the tracks. So I told Chris, my son, I said, I tell you what, I'm going to make reservations for you and Clarence to go to Hollywood, to California, and find me a deal. That's when Donna Summer was real popular. And so I said, I'm going to fly you from OU up to, I think I was going to fly him to Dallas, and then I was going to schedule Clarence to meet him in Dallas. They'd be on the same plane, and I arranged for the hotel rooms and all that. So I did that, but Clarence didn't show. So my son called me up and said, Clarence didn't show. What? So Clarence resented the fact that I had another pair of eyes on him and watching him, and I did not trust him to cut a deal for me. And so I called Clarence, and he said something about he had to go to the cleaners to get his clothes at the cleaners. So I was already mad at him. And then when he got there, he resented the fact that I put him and Clarence in the same room, with double beds, and that Chris was going to be going where. I called him up and fired him over the phone.
Right.
And so my son had to go around and get to know folk, and so he was good at that. So he was the one that came back and told me what needed to happen, blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
And so that's where
Wow. Well,
that's where that started, and it kind of ended here. But when I came back, I took early retirement. I was living in New Jersey, and I was 45 years old
wow.
when I retired. But insecure person who wasn't going. I've had some experiences.
Yeah.
And it was stressful. But you apply yourself, you get to hang a bit how this works in the nonprofit business.
Yeah.
Black Incorporated. Oh shoot! If I had known, I probably would have stayed right up there in New Jersey. I was doing just fine. You hear me?
Yeah.
Just fine.
Well, I think this is a good place to stop for now, and then we can pick up with how the music translated into this amazing organization. But I think we got some really great background for this part 1 of our series, and we're going to pick up next time with this music group and what turned out and how that translated into Black Ink, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
All right. Well, thank you for talking with me today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.